They were supposed to get married in a month, but Ethan Cole and Isabella Vance were trapped in an endless cycle of the same fight. Every argument revolved around the same unbelievable proposal. She was going to have a child with her former mentor's son. "It's just IVF, Ethan. I'm not going to have a physical relationship with him," she'd explained, her voice as cool and detached as ever. "Professor Hayes is dying. His last wish is to see his son, Leo, happy with a child of his own. Leo has no one else to ask. He had to ask me." Ethan had long since passed through the initial shock and fury this insane idea had ignited in him. Now all that remained was a profound sense of exhaustion. "We're getting married in a month, Isabella, and you want to go have a baby with another man. Don't you see how completely insane that is?" His eyes were rimmed with red. He'd held it in for so long, but he couldn't stop the tears that finally tracked down his face. Isabella flinched. It was the first time she had ever seen him cry. She opened her mouth to say something, but the chime of a notification on her phone cut her off. She glanced down at the screen, and when she looked back up at him, any trace of complicated emotion was gone, replaced by a familiar, sterile resolve. "I have to go. You should take some time to calm down." Watching her walk away, Ethan was struck by the sudden realization that in all their years together, he had always been the one watching her back. In college, Isabella Vance had been the definition of untouchable, the campus ice queen who topped every list of impossible crushes. No matter how many guys tried, she rejected them all, eventually cutting off all advances with a single, brutal declaration. She wasn't interested in dating in college. Her ethereal, almost severe beauty made most guys give up. Only Ethan had charged forward, pursuing her relentlessly until he'd finally worn her down and she'd agreed to be his girlfriend. Even after years together, she remained distant, but Ethan, ever the optimist, was a relentless sunbeam trying to warm her. He never imagined that she could be so careless with his heart, that she could make such a request. His own phone buzzed. He looked down and saw a message from Leo Hayes. It was an image, a screenshot of his text conversation with Isabella. "Leo, Izzy, Dad is fading fast. Can we please just forget about Ethan for now and go through with the procedure? Please? I'm begging you." And Isabella's reply, "Okay, I'm on my way." The words hit Ethan like a lightning strike. Now he knew why she had left in such a hurry. He couldn't name the feeling crushing him, a weight so heavy it felt like it was squeezing the air from his lungs. He wanted to scream, to smash something, to break down and sob, but he was completely drained of strength. The emotion was trapped inside him, a poison with no release. He glanced at his reflection in the mirror on the wall and saw a stranger. This wasn't him. Everyone who knew him said he was full of life, a spark of sunshine. But the man staring back was weighed down by a sorrow so deep it was like a pool of ink that would never clear. Where was the person he used to be? In his quest to love Isabella Vance, he had twisted himself into someone unrecognizable, and it hadn't earned him her partnership or her devotion. It had earned him this. The woman he was about to marry was on her way to have a child with another man. A reckless, what-the-hell impulse surged through him. If she had so little regard for their relationship, for their marriage, then maybe they shouldn't have one at all. Taking a deep breath, he picked up his phone, typed out a new post, and, after blocking Isabella from seeing it, hit share. "Getting married in a month. Looking to replace the bride. Any takers?" Most people assumed it was a joke, filling the comments with witty banter and laughing emojis. No one took him seriously. Just as he was starting to feel a fresh wave of despair, his phone rang. Chloe Reed. Seeing that name after so long made Ethan pause. He and Chloe were childhood friends, practically joined at the hip. In school, she was the prom queen, and he was the star athlete. They were also mortal enemies, bickering their way from kindergarten through high school. Their rivalry only ended when they went to different colleges in different cities. After that, he'd met Isabella, fallen for her instantly, and spent nearly every break and summer chasing her instead of going home. After graduation, he'd moved to Seattle for her, and hadn't seen Chloe since. The only contact they'd had was when he posted about his engagement, and she had left a jarring comment beneath it. "Are you sure about this?" He'd assumed she was just trying to stir up trouble and ignored it. He never thought she'd be the first person to call him now. Ethan answered, bracing himself for a torrent of mockery. But she didn't ask a single question. She cut right to the chase. "Ethan Cole, if you're serious about replacing the bride, what about me?" Her words hung in the air, followed by a dead, electric silence. Ethan wasn't sure what her angle was, but he knew she was the perfect candidate. Their families were well matched, and they knew everything about each other. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "Okay, what are your terms?" "No terms. Just one thing. If we're getting married, You need to change my contact name in your phone from annoying pest to wife. The request was so simple it caught him off guard. He had to ask again. That's it. That's it. Well, that, and whatever other married couples have, I want that too. This was even more surprising. He'd assumed she was just trying to get her family off her back about settling down. He had spent years chasing Isabella, never daring to pressure her, because he felt so lucky to have caught the untouchable girl in the first place. He wouldn't have dared ask for more. But recently, his grandfather's health had been failing, and his one wish was to see Ethan married. So, he proposed to Isabella, and just as the wedding approached, she'd hit him with this absurdity. He gripped his phone tighter. I wasn't planning on a fake marriage. If we do this, it's real. A soft laugh came from the other end. In that case, I'll drive up to Seattle now to get you. We can discuss when to sign the papers and plan the ceremony. Ethan was silent for a moment. Give me 2 weeks. I need to handle what's left here. He didn't have to say her name. They both knew he meant Isabella. If this was a real marriage, then the past had to be severed completely. Chloe didn't argue. After hanging up, the first thing Ethan did was change the contact name. Staring at the number, now labeled wife, a bitter, mocking smile twisted his lips. Fine, Isabella. You want to have a baby with someone else behind my back? I'll just find a new bride behind yours. For the next few days, Isabella didn't come home. Ethan didn't ask where she was. He just quietly contacted his friends and asked them to return the wedding invitations he'd sent out. Isabella had said she didn't like a fuss, so they had planned a small ceremony with only a few close friends. They were all shocked when he told them the wedding was off. What do you mean, canceled? You two have always been so stable. Stable? The word tasted like ash in his mouth. Was it stable that he was always chasing her while she remained as cold as ever? Yeah, that part was stable. The only stable thing in their relationship was him. She was a goddess on a pedestal, watching coolly as he drove himself mad with love for her. But now, he was done loving her. He decided not to hide it. The bride has been replaced, he told them. The admission was met not with shock, but with laughter and jokes. Clearly, no one believed him. He couldn't blame them. He had been so hopelessly in love with Isabella, so willing to overlook her indifference. If anyone else had claimed to be done after all that, he wouldn't have believed it either. But it didn't matter. He would prove it to all of them. This time, he was really letting go. He just finished collecting the last of the invitations when Isabella finally came home. The usually immaculate woman looked disheveled, her white blouse wrinkled and her eyes bloodshot. She was clearly exhausted. The first words out of her mouth mirrored what he'd just spent days doing. We need to take back all the wedding invitations. Professor Hayes passed away. I have to observe a mourning period for at least 6 months. We can't get married. As she said it, Isabella braced herself for an argument, for him to explode. She knew how much he'd been pushing for this, how much his grandfather was waiting for this wedding. She had already prepared her defense. But he was just, calm. I understand. I'm sorry for your loss. A shiver went through her. It was strange, but ever since that night, he seemed like a different person. His attitude was off, but she was too drained to analyze it. She rubbed her temples wearily. The memorial service is today. He mentioned you before he passed. I want you to come with me, to pay your respects. Ethan had never liked Leo Hayes, but he had nothing against the kind, old professor. And he doubted the man ever would have imagined his son would try to fulfill his last wish by fabricating a child with another man's fiancée. Out of respect for the deceased, he nodded and agreed. Isabella showered, changed into a dark suit, and they left for the funeral home. They had barely stepped inside when a choked voice called out, "Izzy." Ethan looked toward the sound and saw Leo, dressed in a simple black suit, collapsing to the floor with tears streaming down his face. "Now," Isabella gasped, rushing to his side in 3 quick strides. She gently cradled him in her arms and, without even looking up at Ethan, said, "You go on and pay your respects. I'll stay here with him." Anyone who didn't know the situation would have seen her gentle, worried expression and assumed Leo was her boyfriend. In the past, seeing them so intimate would have sent Ethan into a jealous rage. But now, he glanced at them once, then turned away without a word and walked toward the main hall. Isabella seemed surprised by his lack of reaction, looking up with a flicker of that same strange feeling from before. But Leo whimpered her name, and her full attention snapped back to him. She helped him to a chair and began comforting him in a low, soothing voice. Ethan respectfully paid his respects to Professor Hayes, bowing his head 3 times before approaching the pale-faced woman standing nearby. "Mrs. Hayes, my condolences." She looked up, giving a slight nod of acknowledgement as she took his hand. "You must be Isabella's fiancée. Thank you for coming. I heard you two were about to get married." She's such a loyal and compassionate girl, offering to postpone everything for half a year out of respect for my husband. It must be so hard on you. Ethan just listened quietly, not saying a word about the absurd plot Isabella and her son had concocted. Mrs. Hayes seemed to sense his pain and sighed deeply. We've watched Isabella grow up. My husband was her advisor from her master's all the way through her PhD. She's a deeply sentimental person, which is why she made this decision. Please don't hold it against her. Now that he had a new bride, of course he wouldn't hold it against her. Understand. Seeing how reasonable he was being, Mrs. Hayes couldn't help but continue, the words tumbling out. And please don't mind Leo. I know he clings to her, but I can tell she doesn't feel that way about him. She's very much in love with you. Ethan's body went rigid. In love with him? He hadn't seen a single sign of it. Noticing his disbelief, Mrs. Hayes elaborated. I'm not lying, son. My husband and I always thought she'd bury herself in medical research and never fall for anyone. Then you came along. She never showed it outright, but when she was with us, she would always mention you, little things. How she'd run into you somewhere, what delicious food you'd made for her, what silly thing you did that day to try and win her over. It all sounded like complaints, but we knew. She was in love and didn't even realize it herself. Mrs. Hayes recounted one story after another, painting a picture of an Isabella who cared far more than she ever let on. But to Ethan, the words were just bitter irony. Maybe the old him would have been thrilled to hear this. Now it just felt like a cruel joke. If Isabella truly loved him, why had he never felt it? Why was he always the one chasing her, while she never once slowed down to wait for him? If she loved him, how could she agree to have a child with another man? The moment she agreed to have a baby with Leo Hayes, everything was broken beyond repair. Between them, it was already over. Isabella spent the entire service by Leo's side. By the time it ended, rain had begun to fall, and the guests were leaving. She finally pulled up in her car, tossing two emotionless words at him. Get in. He started to move forward, but the window rolled down, revealing Leo already in the passenger seat. Mrs. Hayes was in the back. Before Ethan could say anything, Leo's choked voice filled the air. Izzy, I want to go to the cemetery to see Dad one more time. Just me, you, and Mom. Please. Mrs. Hayes was the first to frown. Leo, don't be like this. Those few words seemed to strike a nerve. Leo burst into tears. It's my dad's funeral. Can't he just get an Uber? Mrs. Hayes tried to reason with him, but Isabella had already made her decision. She turned her head to Ethan, her voice leaving no room for argument. I'll come back for you. Then she hit the gas, and the car sped away, leaving him standing alone in the rain. From the moment Leo had spoken, Ethan had known how this would end. There was no trace of heartbreak on his face, only a quiet resignation. He waited for hours. She never came back. As the rain intensified, he knew she wasn't coming. The funeral home was in a remote area, with no ride shares available. He didn't have an umbrella. He just started walking, the downpour blurring his vision. After 2 hours of being soaked to the bone, he finally reached a main road where he could hail a cab. That night, he came down with a high fever. Isabella still didn't return. Burning up and delirious, he felt too weak to even call 911. He forced himself out of bed, found some fever reducers, and choked them down with water. The medicine didn't work immediately. He collapsed back into bed, his body on fire, feeling wretched. He didn't know how long he lay there before finally drifting into a fitful sleep. A full day and night passed before the fever broke. He finally heard the sound of the front door opening. Isabella walked in. She didn't look at him, didn't say a word about leaving him behind. She just started packing a suitcase. Only when she was finished did she grant him a single glance. Leo's not doing well. I'm going to stay with him for a few days. Call me if you need anything. Watching her turn and leave without a moment's hesitation, Ethan let out a self-mocking laugh. Call her? What good would that do? He was standing right in front of her, pale and sick, and she hadn't even noticed. What hope was there that she would abandon Leo to come back for him? Isabella didn't come back for the next several days, nor did she call. But Ethan knew exactly what she was up to. After all, she had Leo by her side, and Leo loved to share his life online. Every day, Ethan could see on Leo's Instagram what they were doing. Her, making him homemade chicken noodle soup. Her, taking him out to see fireworks to lift his spirits. Ethan didn't pay much attention. Once he had recovered, he went to his company and submitted his resignation. Ethan, why are you suddenly quitting? Did something happen? His coworkers asked, shocked. He shook his head. I've been away for too long. It's time for me to go home. This explanation only confused them more. Someone finally had to ask, what about Dr. Vance? Her family is here in Seattle. If you move back, you'll be long distance. Ethan paused. See? Even his friends knew he loved Isabella, loved her enough to give up everything and move to this unfamiliar city. Loved her so much that everyone just assumed he would be the one to sacrifice. And she had taken that sacrifice for granted, saving all her patience and gentleness for someone else. He smiled and shook his head. It's not long distance. We're never going to see each other again. After handing off his work, he packed up all his personal belongings from the office into a box and went home. The moment he walked through the door, he saw Isabella and Leo sitting on a couch. "What's all this?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the box in his arms. His face remained calm, the lie coming effortlessly. "The company's relocating offices. I'm just bringing some stuff home early." "Relocating where?" Isabella frowned. Before Ethan could answer, Leo cut in, his voice laced with practiced remorse. "Ethan, man, I'm so sorry. My dad's death has been really hard on me, and I haven't been thinking straight. I've done a lot of stupid things, like that crazy idea about having a baby with Izzy. It was insane, I know that now. Nothing ever happened between us. And now that Dad's gone, there's no need for it anyway. I'm sorry. Please don't hold it against me." He put on a pathetic pleading act. If Ethan hadn't received that taunting screenshot, he might have actually believed him. But he had no energy left to expose Leo's little games. He just gave a curt nod and carried the box to his room. He just set it down when he heard his phone ringing from the living room. He'd left it on a coffee table. As he started to go get it, the bedroom door swung open. Isabella stood there, her face a dark storm cloud. In one hand, she held his phone, her eyes locked on him. "Who is wife in your phone?" It was the first time Ethan had ever seen such an expression on her face. For all these years, she had always been the picture of calm, cool composure. He'd actually thought she was incapable of jealousy. He remembered back when he was first pursuing her. Someone had told him that he needed to be strategic, that constantly being around her would just make her take him for granted. So he tried playing hard to get. He'd stopped showing up for a few days and even made a point of being seen with another girl. He wanted to see if she would get jealous. But when she'd seen him with someone else, her expression hadn't changed. She'd walked right past him, as if he were invisible, not even sparing him a glance. That's when Ethan learned that playing hard to get might work on other people, but not on Isabella Vance. After that, they fell back into their old pattern. She walked ahead, and he chased from behind. 6 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Now, he was finally seeing her jealous. But it was too late. He took his phone from her, and just as he was about to explain, Leo's voice piped up from behind her. "It's probably just one of his buddies, right? We guys call our friends wifey all the time." Since Leo had already provided an explanation, Ethan didn't bother to correct him. He said nothing, simply took his phone, and went back into the bedroom, redialing the number. He assumed Chloe was calling about something important, but when she answered, all her questions were about trivial, everyday things. "Have you eaten yet? It's been raining nonstop in Boston. What's the weather like in Seattle? I heard it's getting cold there. Make sure you stay warm so you don't get sick." At first, he answered each question patiently, waiting for her to get to the point. But she just kept rambling. Finally, Ethan lost his patience. "What is it you really want? If you're not going to tell me, I'm hanging up." That got her attention. She dropped the small talk. "I just wanted to ask if you have any regrets, if you're really going through with changing the bride. You went through all that just to ask me this." Ethan was somewhere between amused and exasperated. Chloe's was uncharacteristically serious, with a hint of vulnerability he almost missed. "You really loved your girlfriend, didn't you?" He started to ask how she knew, but then he thought about it. From the moment he met Isabella in college, to his relentless pursuit, to the joy of her finally saying yes, his self-sacrificing devotion, and finally, the decision to get married and then to call it off, his entire social media presence for years had revolved around Isabella. He had broadcast his love to the world, wanting everyone to know how much Ethan Cole loved Isabella Vance. It would have been harder not to know. He shook his head with a self-deprecating sigh. The long silence on his end made Chloe's heart pound on the other side of the country. She was terrified that he was about to say, "Yes, I still love her. Let's just forget about the whole thing." But then his answer came. "I don't love her anymore." He paused, then gave her the reassurance she was waiting for. "Don't worry. I said I was changing the bride and marrying you. I'm not going to back out because of her." When he finally hung up and went back out, Leo was still there, chatting with Isabella about something. Her expression was still sour when she saw him. After a moment of hesitation, she brought up the contact name again. "Finished talking to your buddy? You really shouldn't use nicknames like that for your friends." Ethan shot her a surprised look, not expecting her to still be hung up on it. He simply nodded in response. It was impossible to tell if he was agreeing with her statement, acknowledging her concern, or both. Isabella took it as an agreement, and her mood visibly improved. Leo, however, watched this entire exchange, and his face became a canvas of complex emotions. He hadn't expected Isabella to still feel possessive of Ethan. In his mind, she wasn't supposed to care about him at all. "It's still early," Leo said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Ethan, Izzy, let me treat you guys to dinner and a movie. A little thank you for being so patient with me lately." Looking at that superficial smile, Ethan could guess Leo's motive. He wanted to flaunt how kind, gentle, and doting Isabella was to him, right in Ethan's face. He shook his head. For one, he had no desire to play these childish games anymore. For another, his time here was running out, and he had a lot to do. But Leo wasn't about to let him off the hook. Seeing him refuse, Leo put on a wounded look and turned to Isabella. "Izzy, is Ethan still mad at me? I know I was being selfish and did some crazy things. He has every right to be angry. It's all my fault." As he spoke, his eyes actually started to well up with tears. The sight tugged at Isabella's heartstrings, and she shot Ethan a disapproving look. Ethan sighed. At this rate, if he kept refusing, Leo was probably going to cry himself into a faint, and Ethan would be cast as the unforgiving villain. In the end, he was dragged along. It was dinner time, so they went to a restaurant first. Leo chose the place, a high-end seafood grill. As they were seated in a private booth, Ethan gave Isabella a long, hard look. She guiltily avoided his gaze, her eyes softening with affection as she turned to Leo, who was ordering. Of course, Isabella felt guilty. She knew perfectly well that he was allergic to shellfish, yet because Leo had said, "The seafood here is amazing," she had brought him here anyway. When the food arrived, Ethan sat with nothing but a glass of water in front of him. In stark contrast, Leo was feasting on crab legs that Isabella had cracked and shelled for him. He looked up at Ethan, who was just sipping his water. "Ethan, this stuff is incredible. Are you sure you don't want to try some?" A sarcastic smile touched Ethan's lips. He was about to speak when Isabella cut in, changing the subject by placing another plate of perfectly peeled shrimp in front of Leo. His eyes lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. He thanked her profusely, the previous topic completely forgotten. After dinner, Leo dragged them to a movie theater. After much deliberation, he chose a horror film. It wasn't until they were in the dark theater that Ethan understood his plan. Ethan was in the aisle seat. Next to him, Leo was a constant source of shrieks and yelps. First, he accidentally grabbed Isabella's soda out of nervousness. Then a jump scare sent him grabbing her hand, squealing about how scared he was. Finally, he abandoned his own seat and threw himself directly into her arms. The move made Isabella flinch. She frowned and lifted her hand, as if to push him away. But after a moment's hesitation, she saw his terrified face, thought of her late professor, and let her hand fall. She glanced to her side and saw Ethan looking directly at them. He had clearly seen the whole thing, but his expression was utterly unreadable. "Ethan," she began, using his nickname for the first time in ages, ready to explain. But he'd already turned back to the screen, seemingly engrossed in the film, completely unfazed. The explanation died in her throat. An unsettling feeling washed over her, but a small whimper from the man in her arms forced her to push it down and whisper comforting words to Leo. Beside her, hearing her gentle reassurances, Ethan let out a soft, mirthless laugh. Knowing he'd be leaving the city for good soon, Ethan wanted to say goodbye to a few close friends. He sent a message to their group chat. "Let's get together. There's something I need to tell you guys." Sophia, the friend he was closest to, replied almost immediately. "Perfect timing. There's a class reunion in a few days. Let's do it then." "Sounds good to me. I'm in." The plan was set. On the day of the reunion, Ethan left early. When he arrived at the private room they'd booked, everyone else was already there. "Ethan, you said you had something to tell us. What's up?" someone asked as he walked in. "I'm moving back home in a couple of days to get married," he said. "I don't know when I'll see you guys again. You're all welcome to come to the wedding." His words reminded them of his Facebook post. "Whoa, Ethan, you were serious about that post?" someone exclaimed. Yeah, man, are you really breaking up with Isabella and marrying someone else back home? Does Isabella know?" Just as the words were spoken, the door to the room opened, and Isabella's voice cut through the air. "Know what?" Seeing her unexpected arrival, the group exchanged awkward glances. Finally, Sophia broke the tension with a forced laugh. "Who let the genius Dr. Vance in here? Did you draw a card?" Seeing Isabella's confused frown, Sophia explained with a smile, "Phoebe's been learning to read tarot cards. Everyone has to be her guinea pig." As if on cue, the aforementioned Phoebe approached with a deck of cards, her eyes gleaming with excitement. Come on, come on. Everybody draw one. Ethan casually drew a card. Seeing him participate, Isabella, who had been pushed along by the group since she arrived, reluctantly agreed. All right. Let's see what our resident psychic has for us. Sophia cheered. Ethan was curious himself. He flipped his card over. The words came into sharp focus. What the heart desires will be lost. What is unsought will be gained in full. He stared at the words, stunned. It wasn't wrong. He handed the card back to Phoebe. After reading it, she gave his shoulder a reassuring pat. The first part sounds bad, but hey, the second part promises a surprise blessing, right? Don't overthink it. He nodded, watching as Isabella pulled a card from the deck. When she turned it over, the words on it made him freeze. The few who saw it fell silent, which only piqued everyone else's curiosity. Someone snatched the card from her, read it, and after a moment of shock, quickly stuffed it back into Phoebe's hand. Phoebe, your psychic skills need some work, the person announced loudly. Everyone knows Ethan and Isabella are rock solid. How could she possibly suffer the eternal loss of her beloved? The comment made Ethan's closest friends exchange uncomfortable looks. How could it not be possible? Ethan was literally planning to leave the city, leave Isabella, and marry someone else. But most people there didn't know the truth, and the chatter shifted to teasing Phoebe about her inaccurate cards. In the playful chaos, no one paid their small group any more mind. Just then, a phone rang, its sound faint in the noisy room, but Isabella heard it instantly and answered. No one knew what was said on the other end, but her expression changed dramatically. Her gaze shot to Ethan. Ethan, you need to come with me to the hospital. Now, he had no idea why he was needed at the hospital, but seeing the gravity on her face, he didn't ask questions. He just followed her as she rushed out of the room. The car sped toward the hospital. Whenever they hit traffic, her frantic honking and the sheer anxiety etched on her face broadcasted her inner turmoil. She turned a 30-minute drive into 15. When they arrived, she didn't say a word, just led him straight to the roof. The moment they stepped out, they saw it. A large man holding a knife to the throat of a terrified, tear-streaked Leo Hayes, who was pressed against the railing. When Leo saw Isabella, a flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. Izzy, help me. Before Ethan could process what was happening, a force shoved him forward. A familiar voice sounded from behind him. Look closely. This is my boyfriend. Let the person you're holding go. Isabella's voice was cold, commanding. He's innocent. He means nothing to me. Even if you kill him, it won't do you any good. Only by holding my boyfriend hostage will you get what you want. Hearing Isabella's words, Ethan finally understood. She had dragged him here to use him as a bargaining chip, to trade his life for Leo's safety. From the murmurs of the onlookers, he pieced together the rest. It was a disgruntled patient's relative, a medical malpractice grievance. The man must have been stalking them, and, seeing Isabella with Leo every day, assumed Leo was her boyfriend and took him hostage. Ethan felt as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over his head, a chill seeping into his very bones. But Isabella was still pushing him forward, relentlessly. How ridiculous! His fiancée spent all her time with another man, and when trouble came, she didn't hesitate to throw him in front of a knife to save that man's life. The assailant looked from Leo to Ethan, who was now stumbling forward. He must have seen Ethan during his surveillance, because while he was still suspicious, the knife at Leo's throat loosened slightly. He warily scanned the area, preparing to swap hostages. But in that split second of distraction, police officers swarmed from all directions. One kicked the knife from his hand with lightning speed, while another pulled Leo to safety. The instant Leo was free, Isabella rushed to him. Leo, are you okay? Leo, still terrified, clung to her, sobbing uncontrollably. Izzy, I was so scared. Only after she was certain he was unharmed did Isabella seem to remember that she had just pushed Ethan into the line of fire. An afterthought. She turned to him. Are you okay? But when he looked at her, his eyes were a dead, placid sea. Isabella was not one for explanations. Most of the time, she simply didn't care enough. But seeing the look on his face now, her heart trembled, and an unfamiliar, out-of-control emotion surged within her. Ethan, the police were already in position. I just needed you to go over and distract him for a second so they could move in. It was just a tactic. Her logic was sound. Ethan didn't argue. Yes, it was just a tactic. And yes, he was fine. But what if, as his fiancée, could she be so comfortable risking her boyfriend's life to save someone else's? In that moment, he looked at her as if she were a complete stranger. See, Ethan? This is the woman you threw your life away for. The one you abandoned everything to follow to this city. Do you regret it? Yes, he thought. He regretted it. But thankfully, it wasn't too late to fix his mistake. After that day, Isabella said Leo was traumatized by the kidnapping and she couldn't just leave him. She stayed by his side, never once leaving. She had completely forgotten that on that same day, she had pushed Ethan toward the attacker too. Fortunately, Ethan had already decided to give up on this hopeless love. He wouldn't let her hurt him anymore. Left alone in the apartment again, he began to systematically erase every trace of Isabella. He picked up their engagement photos from the studio, removed them from the frames, and threw them, one by one, into the fireplace, watching until the flames consumed their smiling faces. Then he turned his attention to everything else. In his effort to get closer to her, he had bought countless matching couple items. The toothbrushes and cups sitting side by side on the bathroom counter, the his and hers towels with cute, embroidered patterns. The matching outfits hanging in the closet, the couple's bracelets in the jewelry box. Ethan gathered it all, packed it into cardboard boxes, and threw it all out. From now on, he wouldn't need any of it. After getting rid of everything, he started packing his own things. He had once poured his heart into making this place a home, hoping to leave his mark everywhere. He'd thought that if she was surrounded by his presence, she would think of him, and that over time, she would truly accept him, love him, need him. But that day had never come. He had a lot of stuff, so the packing was slow. When Isabella came home that evening, he was still at it. She opened the bedroom door to see clothes spread all over the bed. His back was to her. Startled by her sudden entrance, he was trying to think of an explanation when she spoke first. "What's all this? Are you going on a business trip?" Ethan froze for a second, then turned his back to her again to continue packing. Where she couldn't see, a sarcastic smile touched his lips. He'd already quit his job. What business trip? It seemed the possibility of him actually leaving her had never even crossed her mind. That was fine. It made things easier. He didn't want to talk to her anyway. He just grunted in agreement. "When do you leave?" she asked casually. Ethan thought for a moment. This part, he wouldn't lie about. "Tomorrow morning." Isabella didn't say anything else. She left the bedroom and went to the kitchen to cook dinner. She was a great cook, but she rarely did it because of her busy schedule. The times Ethan had eaten a meal she'd made herself were few and far between. She'd been cooking more recently, but all of it had ended up feeding Leo. After they ate, Isabella produced a gift box from behind her back and handed it to him. He looked at it, then back at her surprised. She rarely made such gestures. He didn't take it. "What do you want?" he asked directly. "I'm sorry about what happened the other day," she said after a pause, remembering the look on his face as he'd left the hospital. So that's what this was about. He finally understood her unusual behavior, but he had already decided to let her go, to let her be with Leo. Her protecting Leo was her business now, not his. His reaction was so neutral that it surprised her, but she had something else to say, so she didn't dwell on it. "Leo's been in a really bad state lately. I took some time off work. I'm planning to spend the next few days with him." She watched his face for a reaction, but it remained placid. None of the rage that used to flare up whenever she mentioned seeing Leo. Ethan sat across from her, his heart calm. What was there to react to? In the past, no matter what he asked for, birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, even when he was sick or hurt, she would never take time off to be with him. Now Leo was just in a bad mood, and she was taking a leave of absence for him. What more was there to say? "Do whatever you want." Seeing him toss out those 4 words and say nothing more, Isabella stood up and, for the first time in a long time, hugged him. "Ethan, Leo is my mentor's son. He's been a mess since the professor passed, and now this kidnapping has terrified him. Let me just help him through this, okay? I'll make it up to you later." Ethan didn't agree, but he didn't refuse either. But how could there be a later for them? The next morning, Isabella saw Ethan's suitcase by the door and came back with breakfast. "I'll drive you to the airport." He didn't speak, just sat at the table and ate in silence. When he finished and was about to leave, his phone buzzed. He glanced down and then said the words Ethan had been expecting. "Ethan, something came up. I can't take you." He didn't even have to guess. It was Leo. He just nodded. "Go on. You're busy." Seeing him agree so easily, Isabella felt a wave of relief. She turned and headed for the door, then paused and looked back. "Text me when you're coming back. I'll pick you up." Then she was gone, not looking back again. Ethan watched her disappear down the hall, whispering to the empty space. "Isabella, I'm not coming back." He took one last look around the apartment he had lived in for 6 years. He remembered the excitement of moving in, the loneliness of being left here so many times, and finally, the profound relief of leaving. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "Isabella, we're over. I'm going home to get married." With that, he grabbed his suitcase and walked out the door, hailing a cab to the airport. From this moment on, Ethan Cole would no longer be a part of Isabella Vance's life. After a few hours in the air, the plane touched down in Boston. Pushing his luggage cart with one hand, Ethan checked the message he'd received a short while ago. "I'm at the airport. You land yet?" "Just got here," he typed back. He sent the message and looked up, spotting Chloe Reed waiting in the arrivals hall. She wore a stylish dress and bold red lipstick, exuding an air of sophisticated grace. She kept checking her phone, then scanning the crowd. The moment she saw him, she waved, a bright smile spreading across her face as she walked toward him. He was stunned. He never would have imagined that the scruffy, argumentative tomboy who used to trail him everywhere had transformed into this woman. "What? Cat got your tongue?" The elegant woman stopped in front of him, her voice laced with the same teasing warmth he remembered. "Once we're married, you can stare all you want." Realizing he'd been gawking, Ethan felt his ears turn hot. He put on a show of bravado, rolling his eyes. "You haven't changed a bit, still as conceited as ever." She smoothly linked her arm through his and started walking them toward the exit. "I've got the goods to back it up. Why shouldn't I be?" He was speechless. Looking at her striking face, he couldn't find a single argument. She really was beautiful. She'd always been a big deal in school. Smart, gorgeous, the exact kind of confident, cool girl that all the guys had crushed on. She had seemed like an expert in romance, but she was surprisingly innocent. Whenever a guy confessed his feelings, she would reject them with a stern lecture. "We're students. Our most important job is to study. We shouldn't be thinking about this nonsense." After high school, they went their separate ways. He hadn't paid much attention to her life, but he'd heard through the grapevine that she'd never dated anyone. Thinking of this, he looked at her. "Back then, everyone thought my post was a joke. Why did you believe me?" They had just reached her car in the parking garage. Chloe opened the passenger door for him. Once he was settled, she walked around to the driver's side. She glanced at him, a playful glint in her eyes. "I thought you already knew." "Knew what?" Ethan was completely lost. Seeing his clueless expression, Chloe sighed softly and turned her attention forward, not answering directly. The car pulled smoothly out of the garage. Just as Ethan thought she wouldn't answer, she spoke, her tone light and teasing again. "It's not the first time you've done something that crazy. Of course, I believed you." She paused. The traffic light ahead flickered and turned red. As the car slowed to a stop, she turned to him, her eyes sparkling. "Besides, what if it was real? I would have hit the jackpot." Her first sentence made him pause. Not the first time. His mind raced. As their eyes met, it clicked. She was talking about when he decided to stay in Seattle for Isabella. Her next sentence only confirmed it. Ethan finally understood. A faint blush crept up his neck. "You don't like me, do you?" he asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. The light turned green, and the car started moving again. Her soft laughter filled the space between them. "Yeah, I do. For a long, long time. Longer than you've loved that Isabella girl. Back then, I was young and stupid. I thought if I just got your attention, you'd understand how I felt. But you were so dense. You ran off to a city so far away, all for a woman who didn't appreciate you. But it's okay. I had enough patience to wait for you to come back to me." Chloe kept that last part to herself, but those 3 words, "Yeah, I do," were enough to leave him stunned. He was still processing it when the car pulled into the parking lot of a residential building. "Since when?" he finally managed to ask. This time, she was evasive. "Guess." The familiar feeling of their old dynamic washed over him. He rolled his eyes and got out of the car. Chloe got out too, falling in a step beside him. The Cole and Reed families lived next door to each other. The elevator ride was silent. Ethan stared straight ahead, intensely aware of her leaning casually against the wall, watching as his ears grew progressively redder under her gaze. A soft ding announced their floor. Chloe walked him to his door, but stopped him from coming any closer to hers. She knew that even big, tough guys could be shy. A smile played on her lips. She reached up, ruffled his hair, and before he could get annoyed, she started backing away toward her own apartment. "I'll bring my parents over in a couple of days to discuss the wedding," she called out. "You'd better be ready, Effie." The ridiculous nickname made the heat in his ears flare up again. He shot her a glare, unlocked his door, and disappeared inside without another word. Chloe didn't mind. She practically skipped to the stairwell, too giddy to wait for the elevator. It was only 1 floor down her family's apartment, but she felt like she could climb 20 flights and not feel a thing. Ethan dragged his suitcase inside. He hadn't been home in 6 years, and a strange mix of nostalgia and anxiety washed over him. The living room was empty. The sound of the wheels on the hardwood floor was loud in the silence. Hearing the noise, his white-haired grandfather thought an intruder had broken in. He burst out of his room, wielding his cane like a weapon, his voice booming. "Who's there? Who dares break into the Cole family?" Ethan, he stopped mid-sentence, his eyes locking on the grandson, standing in his living room, tears welling up. The cane fell to the floor with a clatter. Grandpa Cole didn't bother to pick it up. His own eyes instantly reddened, but he turned abruptly and started walking back to his room. Ethan dropped his suitcase and ran after him, catching him just as he was about to sit on his bed. He wrapped his arms around the old man's frail frame. "Grandpa, I missed you so much." Grandpa Cole didn't believe it. The brat had said he was just going away for college, that he'd be back for breaks. But he waited and waited, and 6 years went by. He knew Ethan was coming back soon. Chloe had told him, but he didn't know the exact day. Still, the boy hadn't called him once. He'd probably forgotten all about his old grandpa. "Miss me, my foot." The old man grunted, still not looking at him, and tried to pry Ethan's arms off. But Ethan held on tight, his tears falling onto his grandfather's shoulder. Feeling the dampness, Grandpa Cole sighed and stopped struggling, though his voice was still full of complaint. "Says he missed me, but stays away for 6 whole years. Leaves his old grandpa all alone. If it weren't for that sweet Chloe girl checking in on me, you probably wouldn't even know if I was dead or alive." The bitterness in his voice made Ethan quickly cover his grandfather's mouth. "Don't say that, Grandpa. You're going to live to be 100. No more talk." But his grandfather's words filled him with a fresh wave of guilt. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. It's my fault. I'm not leaving again. I'll stay here and take care of you, okay?" At this, Grandpa Cole shook his head vehemently. "Nonsense. I'm still waiting for you to get married and have kids. I need to see you happy. Only then can I face your grandma and your parents in peace when my time comes." "Grandpa, I told you, no more talk like that." Hearing his grandfather talk so openly about death made Ethan's heart ache. He knew the day would come, but he prayed it would be later, much later. After they talked for a while, the heavy atmosphere lifted. Grandpa Cole looked at his grandson, a wistful expression on his face. "You've grown up, gotten thinner. You've changed. No matter how much I change, I'll always be your grandson," Ethan said, resting his head on his grandfather's shoulder, his emotions finally settling. Grandpa Cole chuckled, but then his expression turned worried. "You said you were getting married. What happened? Why are you back all of a sudden?" Ethan shook his head, not wanting to get into the details. "It didn't work out between us. The wedding's off." Seeing the familiar worry lines return to his grandfather's face, Ethan remembered what Chloe had said. His ears flushed slightly, but after a moment's hesitation, he told him the truth. "Chloe said she's bringing her parents over in a couple of days to talk about our wedding." The old man's eyes went wide. It took him a moment to process the words, and then a hearty laugh boomed from his chest. "Well, I'll be. That girl waited all these years, and she finally got him." Back in Seattle, Isabella didn't get home until 3 nights later. She opened the door to a dark, silent apartment. "Ethan," she called out instinctively, but the only answer was the echo of her own voice. Flicking on the lights, she saw the apartment was exactly as she'd left it, empty. Then she remembered. He was on a business trip. It struck her that he hadn't contacted her at all these past few days. He was supposed to let her know when he was coming back, so she could pick him up, but she hadn't heard a word. She walked into the living room, pulling out her phone and opening her message thread with him. Her screen filled with a history of his one-sided conversations. He used to send her countless messages, funny stories from work, pictures of his day, tentative questions about whether she wanted to spend time with him, complaints about his bad luck. Her replies were sparse. "Okay, I see, fine," and sometimes she didn't reply at all. But he was relentless, a constant stream of messages every day. She scrolled up. The last message he'd sent her was over 2 weeks ago. He hadn't reached out to her in that long. A strange feeling pricked at her heart. For the first time, she deigned to send him a message. "Is your work done? When are you coming back?" She sent it, but there was no reply. A flicker of anxiety rose in her, but then she checked the time. It was already 11 p.m. She let out a breath of relief. He's probably just asleep. That's why he hasn't seen it. Reassured, she put her phone down. Her eyes fell on a piece of paper on the coffee table. Curious, she picked it up. The note was short, but every word struck her like a sledgehammer. "Isabella, we're over. I'm going home to get married." She read it again and again, as if the words might change. She flipped the paper over, desperately hoping to find another sentence written on the back. "Ha, I got you. Just kidding." If she found that, she would scold him fiercely. How could he joke about something like breaking up and getting married? But no matter how many times she read it, the words remained the same. He was serious. Her eyes instantly turned red. With a trembling hand, she snapped a picture of the note and sent it to Ethan. She was about to type, "What the hell is this?" when a large red exclamation mark appeared next to the photo. Below it, a line of text. "This person is not accepting messages from you right now." Her mind went blank. It took a long moment for the reality to sink in. Ethan had blocked her. Numbly, her fingers found his contact information and dialed his number. It rang a few times, then a recorded voice said the line was busy. She froze. He had just declined her call. A hot surge of anger washed over her. When she tried calling again, it didn't even ring. It went straight to a dead tone. He had blocked her number. Isabella couldn't understand. So she paid a little more attention to Leo. Was he really so petty? She had explained it to him. Leo was her mentor's son, and he was emotionally fragile after his father's death. What was he so angry about? Besides, hadn't he agreed to let her spend time with Leo? What was this temper tantrum? Even now, Isabella was convinced Ethan was just trying to make a point to get a reaction out of her. After all, he loved her so much. He had moved to this city for her. How could he really just give up and marry someone else? What Isabella failed to grasp was that Ethan's departure wasn't sudden. It was just that she was only now noticing it. Unable to reach him, she posted a question in their old college alumni group chat, but it was late and no one replied. She walked, defeated, into the bedroom. As she went to wash up, she noticed that all the matching sets of things, the toothbrushes, the towels, the toiletries, were gone. Only her set remained. She opened the closet. The matching outfits he had bought for her with such excitement, the ones she had never worn and had shoved to the back, were all gone. She lay on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, her thoughts a tangled mess. How could Ethan just leave like that? He must be angry. Fine. Tomorrow, she would find him. She would apologize, say all the right things, and he would come back. He always did. Isabella wasn't sure, but right now, all she could do was wait. She didn't sleep all night, tossing and turning, constantly checking her phone for a reply. At noon the next day, she finally got one. The name in the group chat was Sophia, one of Ethan's friends. Isabella excitedly opened the message. It was a photo. The moment she saw it, she felt like she'd been struck by lightning. The man in the sharp white tuxedo, smiling lovingly at his bride, was Ethan. And the bride, nestled in his arms, her hand on his waist, looking up at him with eyes full of adoration, was not her. She stared at the photo, her mind a complete void. She felt disoriented, unsure of where she was. A notification dinged. Another message. "Are you looking for Ethan? He moved back home a while ago to get married. I hear the wedding is next week. Don't they look perfect together? The wedding is next week." The news hit her like a series of punches. No, she didn't believe it. He couldn't just marry someone else. Besides, he'd only just left. It was impossible to plan a wedding so quickly. This had to be fake, a stunt to make her jealous, to make her come running back. The thought gave her a surge of renewed determination. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. After a moment, she sent another message to Sophia. "Do you know where he is now?" Isabella was ready to go to him directly. It had been 4 days since he left. He must be desperate for her to show up by now. But as she went to book a flight, she realized with a jolt, she couldn't remember what city he was from. On the other end, Sophia saw the message and let out a bitter laugh. Now she understood why Ethan, after loving Isabella for so many years, had finally walked away. They had been together for 6 years. He had given up everything to move to Seattle for her, and she didn't even know where he was from. And Sophia had heard about the incident on the hospital roof, how she had pushed Ethan toward a man with a knife to save someone else. Even if the police were there, how could she? It proved what Sophia always suspected. In Isabella's heart, Ethan was never her priority. She spit out a curse under her breath, her reply dripping with contempt. "Why? You planning on crashing the wedding? Give me a break. You didn't appreciate him when he was right beside you. Now, do him a favor and stay as far away as possible." Isabella's brow furrowed. Seeing she would get no help from Sophia, she closed the chat. It was 3 days before the wedding when Ethan received a call from Isabella. He had already blocked her number, so when an unknown number appeared on his screen, he answered without thinking. He regretted it instantly. "Ethan, I've been looking everywhere for you. You finally answered." The moment he heard her voice, he moved to hang up, but it was as if she anticipated his move. "Ethan, wait, don't hang up," she said quickly. "I know I made you angry. Just tell me where you are. I'll come to you, okay?" She forced a gentle tone into her voice, hoping it would convince him she was sincere. But before he could respond, another voice, soft and laced with a hint of playful complaint, came through from his side of the line. "Honey, who's on the phone? Are you going to be long?" The word honey struck Isabella like a physical blow. What made it worse was Ethan's response. He didn't correct her. He just replied calmly, "No one. It's not important." Isabella discovered for the first time that words could kill. Not important. Those 3 words echoed in her ears, a deafening roar that drowned out everything else. She didn't even register what was said next, or when the call ended. She suddenly remembered the day she'd found his phone in the living room. The caller ID had read wife. She dismissed it after Leo told her it was a common joke among guys. But now, it all made a sickening kind of sense. That caller hadn't been a friend. It had been the woman who just called him honey. Rage blinded her, but she was helpless. She didn't even need to try. She knew this new number would be blocked now, too. She hadn't even agreed to the breakup. How dare he find someone else? Why did this relationship get a start when he wanted and end when he was done with it? Her eyes darkened. One thought consumed her. She was not giving up. Isabella contacted their old college class president and, under some pretext, managed to get Ethan's home address. She was about to leave for the airport when her phone rang. The name on the screen was Leo Hayes. After a moment's hesitation, she turned around and headed in his direction instead. It's fine, she told herself. I'll deal with this quickly, and then I'll go find Ethan. I won't let him marry someone else. But Isabella didn't realize that this one delay would cost her 3 days. By the time she had dealt with Leo's latest crisis, it was the day of Ethan's wedding. 3 days passed in a blur. Ethan and Chloe's wedding was held at a hotel not far from their homes. It was a rushed affair, but that didn't mean they had cut any corners. The engagement photos, the venue, the dress, the rings, the new apartment. Every detail was perfect. In fact, Chloe had handled almost everything, leaving Ethan with little to worry about. On the morning of the wedding, they went to the hotel early for hair and makeup. Chloe put her parents in charge of greeting guests, while she stayed glued to Ethan's side. In front of the makeup mirror, Ethan watched Chloe, who was staring at him with unblinking intensity. Chloe, he said, a curious smile on his face. You had all this ready to go. You didn't just start planning this after I came back, did you? She cleared her throat and looked away. Of course she hadn't. She had been planning this for years. The apartment, the dress, the rings, they were all waiting. If he had married someone else, they would have remained hidden forever. But if he married her, she was ready to present them to him at a moment's notice. Everything else was what she had arranged from the day he'd said he was looking for a new bride. Chloe didn't say it out loud, but the way she averted her eyes told him everything. It only made him more curious. She admitted she liked him, but she stubbornly refused to say when it had started. He had a feeling there was more to the story. When Chloe looked back, she saw the thoughtful expression on his face and knew his mind was wandering. Just then, the makeup artist finished up. Mr. Cole, you have incredible skin, she said, packing up her tools. I barely had to use any product. This is easily the simplest groom makeup I've done in my entire career. Chloe stepped forward and planted a quick, soft kiss on his lips. The touch was brief, but it sent a wave of heat through Ethan, his face instantly turning red. Chloe watched him, a satisfied grin spreading across her face. Of course he does. Look who's lucky enough to be his wife. A second later, she yelped as he lightly smacked the back of her head. Chloe, honey, are you trying to murder your new wife? She cried out, clutching her head dramatically. The performance was so over the top, it made him panic, thinking he'd actually hurt her. But the moment he reached out to check, she grabbed his hand and pulled him close. Why do you still call me by my full name? She pouted. Her theatrics made him roll his eyes. The makeup artist chuckled at their playful banter. Be careful not to smudge the makeup, she advised before leaving them alone. They joked around for a little while longer until it was almost time for the ceremony. Chloe went out first to get into position. Just then, Ethan's phone, which he'd left on the table, started ringing. He saw an unknown number flash on the screen. His first thought was Isabella, and his immediate reaction was to decline the call. But a moment later, the same number called back. He sighed. Not every unknown number had to be her. It was ridiculous to avoid all of them just because of one person. He answered. As he'd feared, it wasn't a stranger. A professional voice spoke on the other end. Hello, am I speaking with Mr. Ethan Cole? Yes, Ethan replied, waiting. This is the emergency department at Boston General Hospital, the voice continued. Your girlfriend, Ms. Vance, was in a car accident due to speeding. Her condition is quite serious. We need you to come to the hospital. The words hit him, but they didn't quite register. It took a long moment for their meaning to sink in. Isabella was in Boston, and she'd been in a car wreck? Hello, Mr. Cole, are you still there? The nurse asked, pulling him back to reality. When he spoke, his voice was cold and firm. I'm sorry, but we broke up. Today is my wedding day. I don't have time to come. I suggest you try to contact someone else. He hung up without another word. He suspected Isabella had come to Boston because of him, but just as he'd said, they were over. Her problems were no longer his concern. She had plenty of other people to call. It didn't have to be him. The nurse on the other end stared at the phone, the dial tone buzzing in her ear. A doctor came by, asking if she'd reached the family yet. The nurse shook her head, embarrassed, and started dialing another number. Who would have thought? The patient's emergency contact, listed as boyfriend, had not only broken up with her, but was getting married at that very moment. It was another hour before they finally reached Isabella's parents. When they heard their daughter had been in a crash, that her legs were crushed so badly the nerves had died, requiring amputation, and that her right hand's tendons had been severed by shrapnel, they were devastated. Though the doctors had saved the hand, she would likely never be able to perform delicate work or lift heavy objects again. The couple booked the first flight to Boston. With the family's consent, the surgical team began to prep. Meanwhile, at the hotel, the ballroom was filled with guests. Chloe, in a flowing white gown, walked down the aisle toward Ethan, who was waiting on the stage. Grandpa Cole had always talked about wanting his grandson to find someone to spend his life with, but now that the day was here, he couldn't help but tear up. "Grandpa, what are you crying for?" "This is a happy day," Ethan whispered, though his own eyes were stinging. He forced a smile. "Besides, our new place isn't far. I can come visit all the time." Grandpa Cole saw the unshed tears in his grandson's eyes and patted his hand. Right. No crying. Neither of us." The long aisle suddenly seemed so short. As Grandpa Cole placed Chloe's hand in Ethan's, his voice was thick with emotion. "Ethan, you have to take good care of Chloe. Love each other. Be there for each other for the rest of your lives." He'd promised not to cry, but his voice cracked at the end. Time waits for no one. In the blink of an eye, he had become a frail old man, and the little boy who used to climb on his lap was now a man taking a wife. Chloe nodded solemnly, all her usual playfulness gone. She gripped Ethan's hand tightly, her eyes full of love as she looked at him, then back at his grandfather. "Don't worry, Grandpa. I'll take good care of Ethan. I won't let you down, and I won't let him down." They exchanged vows, they exchanged rings, they kissed. Surrounded by the cheers of their friends and family, Ethan and Chloe became husband and wife. Chloe threw her arms around him, her voice a happy whisper in his ear. "Ethan, I finally married you." Leo arrived at Boston General with Isabella's parents that afternoon. Seeing his daughter lying unconscious in a hospital bed, her mother broke down completely. Her brilliant daughter, a prominent surgeon at such a young age. When she woke up, how could they possibly tell her that she would never stand in an operating room again? But no matter how difficult, the truth had to be faced. Isabella woke up a week later. When she opened her eyes, her parents were there. Leo was there. But the one person she wanted to see most was not Dad, Mom. Her voice was weak, her breathing shallow. "Have you seen Ethan? Did he come to see me?" Her parents exchanged unhappy glances. They bit back their frustration, not wanting to upset her further. But Leo, his eyes filled with tears, leaned over her bed and showed her his phone, his voice dripping with righteous indignation. "You're like this because of him, and you're still asking about him? He's been busy getting married and going on his honeymoon. He's having the time of his life. Why would he remember to come see you?" Leo had no desire to see them reconcile. This was his chance to drive a wedge between them, to make Isabella give up on Ethan for good. He conveniently forgot that she had just woken up and was in no condition for such a shock. Her parents couldn't stop him in time. Isabella's eyes locked on the screen, on Ethan's social media post from the day of her accident. A picture of 2 marriage certificates, with the names Ethan Cole and Chloe Reed clearly visible. Her eyes turned red, her mind reeling in disbelief. How could this be? How? He had really married someone else. He had really been able to walk away from their relationship so easily. What did their 6 years together mean? She didn't understand. She couldn't believe it. She tried to push herself up, intending to find him, but the movement made her freeze. Isabella stared at the grotesque scar on her wrist. A cold dread settled in her heart. Her eyes, wild and red, darted from her right hand, which felt clumsy and weak, to her legs, which had felt nothing when she tried to move them. With a trembling hand, she reached for the blanket covering her, but her parents quickly pressed it down, stopping her. Seeing the sorrow in their eyes, the way they shook their heads, she already knew. She was a doctor. She hadn't lost consciousness immediately after the crash. She had seen her own injuries. Her mind had just been protecting her from the memory. Her voice choked with sobs. She ignored Leo, who was now hovering beside her, and looked at her parents, desperate for them to deny what she already knew. "Mom, my legs, my hand. They're okay, right?" "They're still okay." Their silence was her answer. They just held the blanket down, her mother's tears falling in heavy drops. Leo finally sensed the shift in the room's atmosphere and quietly hit his phone. "It's okay, Izzy," he said softly. "You'll get better. I'll always be here for you." His words were the spark that ignited the bonfire of her rage. She shoved him away with all her might. He stumbled backward, caught off guard, his head hitting a chair as he fell to the floor with a cry of pain. But the sight of him on the ground no longer elicited any sympathy from her. "If it weren't for you, Ethan never would have left me," she screamed. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be in this mess. Get out. Get out right now." Her furious shouts pierced his heart. His face went pale, but he stubbornly refused to leave. Her parents, however, froze when they heard her words. "What does that mean?" her father asked sharply. Isabella went still. A long time later, she slumped back against the pillows and in a defeated voice, told them everything that had happened. As they listened to the story of her plan to have a child with another man just before her wedding, their expressions shifted from shock to disappointment. "Isabella," her father said, shaking his head, "you've never given us a moment of worry your entire life. How could you do something so foolish, so thoughtless, at a time like this?" Isabella didn't answer, just covered her face with her hands as muffled sobs escaped her. She didn't know why she'd done it. She just thought. She thought he loved her. She thought he would never leave. Seeing her daughter like this, her mother's heart softened. "Even if you were wrong," she said, her anger now directed at Ethan, "you ended up like this trying to get to him. How could he be so cruel?" Isabella wanted to defend him, but the words stuck in her throat. A part of her couldn't help but wonder the same thing. "I'm like this, and he still won't even come to see me?" Just then, Leo got back on his feet. He walked to her bedside, pulled out a ring, and knelt down. "Isabella, marry me. I'll take care of you for the rest of my life." The proposal stunned everyone in the room. Isabella's mind went blank. "I could never marry you," she blurted out. When she refused, he turned to her parents, pleading his case. "Dad, Mom, I'm not marrying him," Isabella said, her eyes closed tight, ignoring her parents' attempts to reason with her. "Why are you being so stubborn?" her mother said, exasperated. "Leo loves you, and now you need someone to take care of you. Are you still waiting for Ethan to come back? He's married, Isabella. What are you waiting for?" She knew her parents were right. She just couldn't accept it. She used to think her feelings for Ethan were just a matter of habit. But now, with him gone, married to someone else, her bleeding heart told her the truth. "No, Isabella, you loved him. You can't live without him." But as her father said, he was married. Waiting was pointless. She clenched her fists, but the word yes refused to form on her lips. How could she just accept this fate? She had been so close to marrying Ethan. Why had everything fallen apart so spectacularly? Ethan knew nothing of Isabella's turmoil. After a month-long honeymoon, he and Chloe returned to Boston. It was early September, and the city was buzzing with students returning to the universities. On the first day of classes, Chloe stood by the door while Ethan meticulously fastened the buttons on her blouse. She looked up at him, a wistful expression on her face. "They're perfect," he said, smoothing out a wrinkle. "I still don't know why you have to dress so formally. You could just wear something casual." Chloe gave him a disapproving look and pointed to her cheek. Ethan rolled his eyes, but leaned in and gave her a soft kiss. Only then did she smile. "And how else are my colleagues and students supposed to see how brilliant and handsome my husband is?" Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, shaking his head as he gently pushed her out the door. "Just go. I can't believe Boston University hired you as a professor. They're probably regretting it already. They should be thanking their lucky stars." Chloe shot back over her shoulder, her eyebrows raised defiantly. "I was their star student, and now I'm their star lecturer. Okay, we get it. You're a genius. Now go before you're late on your first day." Chloe laughed, perfectly content with being ushered out the door. A rumor started circulating at the university. The notoriously tough Professor Reed had gotten married, and her mood had improved drastically. She was smiling so much her cheeks probably hurt. It wasn't until Ethan went to meet her on campus later that he found out she had been showing off her wedding ring every single day. Her conversations were now peppered with, "Oh, this outfit? My husband picked it out. My lunch? My husband made it. He's an amazing cook. My plans for the weekend? A date with my husband, of course." At that moment, however, Ethan was still blissfully unaware, contemplating whether he should start looking for a new job. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find a delivery man with a package. After signing for it, he took it inside. It contained a single red envelope. He opened it. The first thing he saw were the two names at the top of the invitation: Isabella Vance and Leo Hayes. So, they had ended up together after all. He couldn't imagine why they would send him an invitation. To show off? To prove that she could find someone else after he left? What did it have to do with him? He didn't care who she married now. He tossed the invitation aside and went back to what he was doing. It wasn't until Chloe came home that afternoon and saw it on the floor that it was picked up again. "Whose invitation is this?" she asked. "Your ex-girlfriend?" Took her long enough. She casually opened the invitation, raising an eyebrow at the names inside. Ethan shrugged, taking it from her and moving to toss in the trash. "Don't worry about them. It's weird." But Chloe lifted her arm high, snatching the invitation out of his reach. A wicked grin spread across her face. "Well, since they were so kind as to invite us," she said, her voice full of mischief, "we should probably go and see the show, don't you think?" She was curious to see what kind of game Isabella was playing, sending them an invitation at a time like this. The wedding was set for the following month. They had more time to plan than he and Chloe had, but the end result was still lackluster. Ethan couldn't believe he was back in Seattle so soon, and with Chloe on his arm, no less. Many of the guests knew Ethan and knew the history between him and Isabella. Seeing him walk in with another woman sparked a flurry of whispers. "I never would have guessed. Just a few months ago, we all thought those two were a sure thing, and now they're both married to other people." One guest mused, watching as Ethan and Chloe found a table. His friend chuckled. "Well, technically they both got married, didn't they?" The first man paused, then laughed as well. "When I first heard Ethan married someone else, I thought he was the one who cheated." Another person chimed in, drawing the attention of the first two. "But now I think he was just heartbroken." "What do you mean?" "I heard Isabella's wedding was rushed because she's pregnant. Already 2 months along." "What? 2 months? If you do the math, that means she got pregnant right after she and Ethan broke up?" "I don't know the details. Remember that post Ethan made about finding a new bride? It was probably because of this." The murmuring wasn't loud, but their table was close enough that Ethan caught snippets, including the part about Isabella being pregnant. He scoffed. So that's why she had the nerve to send him an invitation. She was pregnant. 3 months. It must have happened when they were planning the IVF. She had lied to him, saying they stopped after the professor died. Chloe squeezed his hand. Ethan turned and saw the worry and a touch of hurt in her eyes. He smiled and shook his head, signaling that he was okay. Then he beckoned for her to lean closer. She did, and he pressed a quick, soft kiss to her cheek. Her eyes widened in surprise. When she looked at him, he had already turned away, but the bright red tips of his ears betrayed his own flustered state. From a distance, Isabella saw it all, a bitter cocktail of emotions churning inside her. From the way they acted together, she could no longer tell herself that Ethan had only married someone else to spite her. He seemed to genuinely like this new woman. He accepted her, even initiated affection. It was nothing like their relationship, where she had stood still while he did all the chasing. This was a partnership. He had truly walked into a future without her, while she was still drowning in a past that included him. Leo came up behind her wheelchair, his eyes following her gaze to where Ethan and Chloe were sitting. They were whispering to each other, a palpable aura of happiness surrounding them that was a stark contrast to the polite, empty space between him and Isabella. Leo forced down the jealousy and hatred rising in his throat, plastering on a smile. "Izzy, it's almost time. You should go get ready." He reached out to push her wheelchair, but her gaze remained fixed on Ethan. She didn't know if this would be the last time she ever saw him, but she knew that after today, there would be no more chances for them. She looked down at her empty pant leg, at the ugly scar on her right hand. A tidal wave of grief crashed over her, but she couldn't even find the courage to stop Leo from pushing her away, to go to Ethan one last time. She was completely broken. Even if this wedding wasn't happening, even if she hadn't married someone else, he would never want a cripple like her. Ethan felt her stare and looked up just in time to see Leo wheeling her away. He was momentarily stunned. He had no idea she was in a wheelchair. Was it because of the car accident? Was it that serious? His question was answered when the ceremony began. He hadn't heard much about Isabella since the accident. Seeing her now, the phrase "a world of difference" felt like a gross understatement. He couldn't see any other injuries, but even without a medical degree, he knew that in this state, she would never be a doctor again. A fleeting sense of melancholy passed through him. So much could change in just 3 months. On the stage, Isabella's face was a mask of gloom. There was no joy, only the grim expression of someone who was owed a great deal of money. At another table, Leo's mother, Mrs. Hayes, watched with a heavy heart. She had been shocked when she learned Isabella was pregnant, and her first instinct had been to tell her to terminate it. Even though Isabella and Ethan were broken up, she could see that Isabella's heart was still with him. Leo trying to trap her with a child was a recipe for disaster. What's more, with Isabella in her current condition, Mrs. Hayes was worried about her mental state. But the most surprising thing was that Isabella had agreed to the wedding at all. Remembering where she was, Mrs. Hayes smoothed the worried expression from her face and placed Leo's hand over Isabella's, hoping for the best. But Isabella didn't react, didn't even acknowledge her. As Mrs. Hayes's face began to harden, Leo stepped in to smooth things over, taking Isabella's wheelchair himself and positioning them in front of the officiant. Despite the awkwardness, the ceremony proceeded. Many of the traditional elements were cut due to Isabella's condition, but the exchanging of the rings was unavoidable. A flower girl brought the rings up. Isabella took one, but as she went to place it on Leo's finger, she froze, staring at the diamond. It was one of the rings she and Ethan had chosen for their wedding. The wedding was finally happening, but the groom was not him. Leo held out his hand, the smile on his face growing strained. He heard her whisper a name, so softly it was almost lost. "Ethan, will you marry me?" His smile finally broke. But with so many people watching, he couldn't just walk away. He forced his lips into a painful grin and whispered, "Izzy, it's time to exchange rings." Isabella snapped back to reality and slid the ill-fitting ring onto his finger. From the audience, Ethan saw her distant expression. He couldn't understand her at all. Perhaps it was true. You always want what you can't have, and take for granted what you do. When he had loved her, he had never felt her love in return. She treated his affection as her due, saving her tenderness for Leo. Now that she had what she ostensibly wanted, she was putting on this tragic performance. Who was it for? He suddenly remembered the tarot cards from the reunion. What the heart desires will be lost. What is unsought will be gained in full. He had wanted nothing more than a life with Isabella, but she had always been the one to cast him aside. Then, when his heart was closed off, he'd married Chloe out of a mix of spite and duty to his grandfather. He had expected nothing more than a polite, passionless marriage, but Chloe had given him more love than he could have imagined. His card had come true. What about Isabella's? Eternal loss of her beloved. Her behavior, now, certainly seemed to fit, but Ethan didn't believe she loved him. To her, he was a habit, a comfortable presence who would chase her, give her everything she wanted, and ask for nothing in return. Now that he was gone, she claimed to love him. Who would believe that? Ethan didn't stay for the rest of the wedding. Midway through, Chloe started to feel nauseous, so they left early. She thought it was just the stuffy ballroom, but once they were outside, she felt even worse, throwing up in the bushes. Though she insisted she was fine, Ethan was worried and took her to the nearest hospital. They were sent from the ER to the obstetrics unit. When the doctor asked for the third time when her last period was, it finally dawned on both of them. She was 2 weeks late. "Has it ever been this late before?" the doctor asked. Chloe shook her head. It was never perfectly regular, but never this late. To be safe, the doctor ordered a full workup. When the test results came back, confirming she was 4 weeks pregnant, it still didn't feel real. "Ethan," she whispered, her eyes wide. "I'm actually pregnant." Chloe cupped his face in her hands and gave him a hard, joyful kiss. "Honey, you're going to be a dad," she exclaimed, her smile so wide it looked like it might split her face. The sudden kiss caught him off guard, and his cheeks flushed crimson. "What are you doing?" "We're in a hospital," he hissed, pushing her away gently. But they were in the maternity ward, where such displays were common. No one paid them any mind. In that moment, any thought of staying in Seattle vanished. They booked the next flight back to Boston. Chloe went upstairs to tell her parents the news, while Ethan went to his own apartment to tell his grandfather. He burst in the door, but the apartment was silent. His happy shouts went unanswered. A cold knot of dread formed in his stomach. He rushed to the bedroom and found his grandfather lying on the floor, unresponsive. With trembling hands, he called 911, then Chloe. Grandpa collapsed. Was all he could manage to get out, his voice choked with sobs. The 5 words were enough to send the entire Reed family rushing downstairs. They all went to the hospital together. As they waited outside the operating room, Chloe held Ethan, letting him cry into her shoulder. "He's going to be okay, Ethan," she whispered, trying to soothe him. "You have to stay strong. He'll worry about you when he wakes up." Ethan knew he needed to calm down, but the image of his grandfather, motionless on the floor, was burned into his mind. He couldn't stop the tears. Chloe's parents stood by, blaming themselves. They usually checked on Grandpa Cole every day. They couldn't believe this had happened on the one day they hadn't. Finally, the light above the operating room door turned green, and the surgeon emerged. "You got him here just in time," he said, accustomed to the emotional scenes in the waiting room. The procedure was a success, but he's weak. He'll need to stay in hospital for observation for a while. The words were a balm to Ethan's frayed nerves. Chloe's parents went to handle the paperwork, while she went with Ethan to the recovery room. Grandpa Cole woke up 3 days later. He looked at Ethan's guilt-ridden face and sighed, gently wiping a tear from his grandson's cheek. I'm getting old, son. Not as sturdy as I used to be. One little fall, and I cause all this commotion. Ethan gripped his grandfather's wrinkled hand. You're not old, Grandpa, he insisted, shaking his head. You're going to live for a long, long time. You have to watch the baby be born and watch her grow up. At the word baby, a spark returned to the old man's eyes. I'm going to be a great-grandfather? Well then, I'd better stick around for a while. Just like you said, Ethan, I have to watch my great-grandchild be born and watch her grow. 7 months into Chloe's pregnancy, a friend from Seattle gave Ethan an update. Isabella had had a miscarriage. It was late term. The baby couldn't be saved. She had never liked Leo. She had only agreed to the marriage because she'd gotten pregnant after a drunken night. Now, with the baby gone, a sliver of hope bloomed in her heart. The baby is gone. I never had a child with another man. Does that mean Ethan can forgive me? But first, she had to divorce Leo. The more she pushed, however, the more he resisted. He refused to sign the papers, and with her limited mobility, she couldn't easily file on her own. He was, on the surface, a doting husband. So, she had to wait. 6 months was a long time, and as she waited, she received the news. Chloe had given birth to Ethan's daughter. That was the last straw. She couldn't wait any longer. She booked the next flight to Boston. It was 8 o'clock at night when Isabella arrived at the hospital. She appeared before Ethan, looking worn and haggard. For a moment, he didn't even recognize her. Only when she spoke, her voice hoarse, did he connect this exhausted woman with the once-renowned surgeon from Seattle General. He glanced behind her. She was alone. You came by yourself? He asked, surprised. Isabella nodded. She rarely left the house anymore. But this was for Ethan. It was her first time traveling alone since the amputation, and it had been an ordeal. Stairs she couldn't get her wheelchair up, sidewalks with posts too narrow to pass through, the humiliation of sliding backward on a ramp because she still wasn't used to the chair. But all that exhaustion vanished the moment she saw him. Her heart pounded with a nervous hope. Ethan, she began, the words she had rehearsed for months finally tumbling out. I didn't have a baby with Leo. Can you forgive me now? Before he could answer, her wheelchair was jerked backward. A furious Chloe stormed past her and sat down next to Ethan. Excuse me, Ms. Vance, Chloe said, her voice dripping with ice. In what capacity are you asking him that question? As the ex-girlfriend who broke his heart? As Leo Hayes' current wife? Or as a shameless manipulator trying to use her disability to gain sympathy? Isabella was speechless. Chloe wasn't finished. And you have the audacity to try and poach my husband right in front of me? Did you forget that Ethan is married to me now? What exactly did you hope to accomplish by showing up here in the middle of the night? Are you trying to be a homewrecker? I had no idea the famous Dr. Vance from Seattle General had such low moral character. Oh wait, I guess it's not that surprising, coming from someone who was planning to have a baby via IVF with another man right before her own wedding. Isabella's face cycled through shades of red and white. This is between me and Ethan, she finally snapped. It has nothing to do with you. Chloe scoffed, about to deliver another verbal blow, but Ethan cut her off. This is a strange thing to say, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Chloe is my wife. You are harassing her husband. How does that have nothing to do with her? The single sentence had two very different effects. Chloe instantly relaxed, preening under his defense. It wasn't often he called her his wife, and to do it so publicly in front of her rival was a thrill. For Isabella, however, Ethan's words were more devastating than any of Chloe's insults. Her face went white, her eyes wide with disbelief. You're defending her? You actually. Her words were cut off by the sound of a baby crying. She suddenly remembered why she was here. Chloe had a daughter, Ethan's daughter. She realized what a fool she'd been, what a stupid thing she had just said. She watched as Ethan, who had just been so sharp with her, instantly softened. He turned, picked up the baby from the bassinet beside him, and began to gently soothe her back to sleep. He spared a moment to shoot a glare at Isabella for raising her voice and waking the baby. Once the infant was sleeping soundly again, he laid her back down and turned to Isabella, his face hard. You're not welcome here, Isabella. Leave. Isabella wheeled herself out of the hospital, utterly defeated. The night sky was dark, with a full, round moon hanging above. She remembered that she had met Ethan on a night just like this. He had been cradling a tiny, dying kitten, frantically asking for a vet that was still open. He had bumped into her in his haste. She'd seen the kitten, understood his panic, and taken him to an emergency clinic. But the kitten was too small, too weak. It hadn't survived. He had found a place to bury it and had cried for a long time. She had gotten a message from her professor and had to rush back to the university. She'd handed him a tissue and left. After that, he had latched onto her, proclaiming his love. She hadn't accepted, but he was persistent, coming up with all sorts of creative ways to win her over. She had gotten used to him being there. When he disappeared, when he showed up with someone else, she had panicked for a moment. But she had seen the love for her in his eyes and assumed it was just a game, a way to get her attention. Eventually, they got together. Then her professor's health declined. She was so grateful for his mentorship, and knowing his biggest worry was his son, Leo, she had tried to look out for him. She had only wanted to honor her professor's memory. She had never actually fallen for Leo, never intended to betray Ethan. But they had ended up here anyway. She had been too confident, too sure that Ethan would never leave her. She had forgotten that there is no forever in this world, that one-sided love can only last so long. She was wrong, but she had realized it far too late. Isabella wheeled herself away from the hospital, her silhouette small and lonely under the moonlight. Waiting for her in the darkness was Leo, his face pale, his stance resolute. When he saw her, a small, twisted smile touched his lips. "Izzy, I'm here to take you home. Isabella, I've come this far for you. I will never let you go. Even in death, I will be bound to you." Back in the hospital room, Chloe stared at her sleeping daughter, her heart full. Ethan gently poked her shoulder. "Have you picked out a name for her yet?" he whispered. "Not a full name. My parents and I want Grandpa to choose that. But we can pick a nickname." "What do you think?" she asked, shaking her head. "My parents hated all my suggestions." Ethan was curious. "What did you come up with?" "Pebbles, Sparkles, and Lammy." He ignored the hopeful look in her eyes. Animals and shiny objects. Their daughter would be bullied for years. "Let's call her Annie," he said, making an executive decision. It was simple, classic, and safe. The next day, Annie was officially her nickname. Grandpa Cole, whose health had been improving, was thrilled to be given the honor of choosing his great-granddaughter's full name. He spent the entire night poring over books before settling on one. Caroline Grace Cole. Ethan loved it. No one mentioned what had happened the night before. The past was the past. It was time to look forward.